the time must never yield. When the greenbacks charge through the line, they're bound for victory. Hail Green, wait for you, we give a cheer. Hail Green, wait for you, we have no fear. So every man in every play, and then we'll win the game today. Hurrah for Old Tulane.
100 years of Tulane football. So much has happened as we turn the pages of history. Hello, everybody. I'm Ken Berthelot, voice of the Tulane Green Wave, your host for this Centennial celebration. We hope you enjoy some of Tulane's most memorable moments.
Tulane has been a symbol of education in the South since the days of the Civil War. The generosity of Paul Tulane and Josephine Newcomb made possible educational opportunities at both Tulane and Newcomb, respectively, for both men and women. Those opportunities moved to the athletic field in 1893 when Coach T.L. Bain organized the first football team on campus. The first game was a 12-0 loss to the Southern Athletic Club. Bain coached Tulane to a 1-2 record that first year and returned in 1895 to coach Tulane to its first winning season at 3-2. The captain of the first Tulane team, John Lombard, was the first alumnus hired as coach in 1898. The captain of that 1898 team, Charles Eshelman, later became the first 19th century athlete to be named to Tulane's Athletic Hall of Fame. The 1900 team was the first Tulane team to register a perfect record. Coach H.T. Summersgill led Tulane to a 5-0 record. In 1910, A.A. Mason began a 3-year run as coach, establishing a number of firsts, including a record for coaching longevity at that time. Mason's teams also produced Tulane's first 4-sport letterman, T. Sims Walmsley, who would later become mayor of New Orleans. The high point of the 1912 season was a 95-0 win over Southwestern Louisiana. Those points and the 15 rushing touchdowns are still Centennial Tulane records. In 1915, with war clouds storming over Europe, a 23-year-old Minnesotan named Clark Shaughnessy signed to coach football at Tulane before Notre Dame assistant coach Newt Rockne could even get an interview. Rockne was told not to come, and Shaughnessy began an 11-year reign that would make him Tulane's winningest coach at the time. As World War I began, Tulane began playing in a new stadium that was built on campus where the A.B. Freeman School of Business now sits. Tulane beat Washington Artillery 19-0 to dedicate their new stadium. A high point of those early years was 1918 when Tulane romped past Southwestern Louisiana 74-0. Harold Gentling broke off a 95-yard run, the longest run from scrimmage, a record that would last until Tulane's centennial year in 1993, when redshirt freshman Gerald Sowell busted through the Alabama defense to rush 98 yards for a touchdown and set the new Tulane record. The foundation was being laid in those early years for the Tulane powerhouse teams of the 20s and 30s. The Green Wave nickname was affixed to the program in 1920, and it would endure. The era saw some great moments like Alfred Brother Brown's 65-yard punt return that beat LSU in 1921. In 1922, the program would take off under Shaughnessy's direction. By 23, Tulane would reel off 8 straight and eventually compile a 21-1-1 record, becoming a national power. Names like Charles Peggy Flournoy and Milton Levy joined Brother Brown, being named All-Southern in 1924. Shaughnessy's finest team was the 1925 group that compiled a 9-0-1 record. One of the game's great punters, All-American Peggy Flournoy, also a powerful running back, set 2 long-standing records with 4 rushing touchdowns and 31 points in a win over Louisiana Tech. Captain Lester Lautenschlager helped form the backbone of a team that did not give up 2 TDs in any game. After the season, Tulane's administration turned down a Rose Bowl bid because of the amount of time that a long train trip would keep the team away from its studies. In 1926, Shaughnessy's last year as coach, Tulane dedicated a new stadium on Willow Street that would showcase countless memories for Green Wave football for years to come. A former Tulane assistant, Bernie Bierman, returned in 1927 as coach and built his program around halfback Bill Banker. Banker was nicknamed the Blonde Blizzard because of his thick mane of light blonde hair that was so visible to spectators as he raced without a helmet through opposing defenses. From 1928 to the 32 Rose Bowl, the Wave compiled a 32-2-1 record, including a perfect 9-0 record in 29. Players like All-American Banker, Captain Charles Rucker, All-Southern center Lloyd Preacher Roberts, halfback Ike Armstrong, and Jerry Dalrymple led the way. Dalrymple's in-play during his 3-year career led many to consider him the finest player in Tulane football history. Louis Boasberg, who played with Dalrymple, remembers Jerry's exploits on the field.
Well, I'd have to say Jerry Dalrymple might have been, certainly for his weight, the greatest defensive end that ever lived, because I saw Jerry many times take all of the interference and then get the ball carrier. And he was a pretty good pass receiver.
Dalrymple was Tulane's first inductee into the National Football Foundation Hall of Fame. The 31 team may have been Tulane's best football team in history, shutting out 8 regular season opponents and setting a record for wins at 11-0. The 31 team earned a Rose Bowl bid behind the efforts of players like Zimmerman, Lefty Haynes, John Scafidi, Jerry Dalrymple, Red Dawson, Wop Glover, and Noli Phelps. Zimmerman became Tulane's first consensus All-American and established individual rushing, passing, and total offense records with 1,459 yards. Those records would endure for 48 years. The season finale came in the Rose Bowl against Southern Cal, and Louis Boasberg, a lineman on that team, remembers that game well.
I was the biggest movie fan that ever lived. And in those days, I was more of a movie fan than a football player. And I loved going to the studios. When I got out there in Hollywood, I went crazy because we visited Fox, Paramount, Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer, and that was in the golden age of movies. We met all the stars. Marlene Dietrich, Clark Gable, and Dorothy Jordan came up, and she says, "Oh, I love Southern football players." Well, I almost fainted because she was really a cute gal, and we both went for her. Anyway, I can't recall all the stars we met at that time, but it was really a great night. Oh, we were lucky because there was a Tulane team before that was invited to go to the Rose Bowl, and for some unknown reason they turned it down. So we were the first.
New Year's Day, 1932. Tulane and the University of Southern California were in Pasadena to take part in the Rose Bowl festivities. The Tulane Band and the Rose Bowl Parade set the stage for the showdown between the nation's 2 top-ranked teams. Tulane was riding the crest of an 18-game winning streak, their perfect 11-0 record on the line. A capacity crowd of 84,000 watched to see if the Green Wave could stop the Trojans of Southern Cal, whose only blemish was their opening loss to St. Mary's. The first quarter was scoreless. Then on the first play of the second quarter, Tulane's Harry Wop Glover exploded with one of the most exciting runs in Rose Bowl history. From the Tulane 5-yard line, Glover breaks free, galloping 58 yards to the Southern Cal 38-yard line. But the Green Wave drive stalled, and it was Southern Cal who scored first. From the Tulane 6-yard line, Ray Sparling went in for the score. Johnny Baker converted, and Southern Cal led 7-0 at the half. The Trojans struck quickly in the third quarter on Ernie Pinkert's 2 28-yard scoring runs for a 21-0 USC lead. But Tulane, refusing to retreat, rallied its forces, scoring on an 11-yard pass from Don Zimmerman to Lefty Haynes. Then just moments later, after recovering a Southern Cal fumble, Jerry Dalrymple grabbed a Don Zimmerman pass and advanced to the Trojan 3-yard line. Glover then took it across for 6. But that's the way it ended. Southern Cal 21, Tulane 12. The Green Wave had outplayed the Trojans with 9 more first downs, 65 more yards rushing, and 15 more yards passing. But time had run out for Tulane, despite the Tulane defense shutting out Southern Cal the rest of the way. Assistant coach Ted Cox was named Tulane's head football coach, replacing Bernie Bierman, who resigned to return to his alma mater, Minnesota. In 5 years, Bierman had built Tulane into a national power with 36 wins and 10 defeats. Tulane's football program had become a national power, one of the best football teams in the land. The Green Wave's success had captured the fancy of the New Orleans populace. Tulane Athletic Administrator M.L. Lagarde remembers the love affair between the Crescent City and the Green Wave.
The thing that impressed me so much were the number of people that were in attendance, the number of people that was so caught up in the Tulane spirit in those days. And it was infectious. You came to the stadium and you looked about and saw all those people that were Tulane followers, and you said to yourself, this Tulane football is going to be here forever. And I think that's the mystique that got to me.
Bernie Bierman left after the Rose Bowl and was replaced by assistant coach Ted Cox. Tulane became a charter member of the Southeastern Conference in 1933. In 1934, All-American Claude Little Monk Simons, son of legendary Green Wave trainer Claude Big Monk Simons, helped the Green Wave steamroll its way to a 10-1 record that included a 20-14 victory over Temple in the inaugural Sugar Bowl Classic. Barney Mintz, who played with Monk Simons, remembers the talent of Little Monk.
Well, Monk had a belief in himself that equaled anybody's I've ever met. In his first 2 years at Tulane, he was really mediocre. He wasn't even first string all the time. In his first year, they played him in the first game as a defensive and offensive end. In his second year, he was second string to me for a while. And when we came back for the third year, he said to me, when I met him that summer after being at camp, he said to me, I'm going to make All-American. I giggled to myself with that kind of statement after not having even played first string totally in the first 2 years. Nevertheless, he made All-American. And he scored 1 touchdown in each game, only one, but one, in each game that we played.
Tulane beat a Pop Warner-coached Temple Owl team in that first Sugar Bowl, and it was Barney Mintz who threw the second-half touchdown pass to end Red Hardy to give the Green Wave the victory.
Well, I wouldn't say I was a star. It just happened that I happened to throw a pass that was tipped by a defender and caught by our man for the winning touchdown. I still tell my kids that I was the star of the game, but that's the way it goes.
The inaugural Sugar Bowl trophy adorns this trophy case in the Jim Wilson Athletic Building's Hall of Fame atrium. Tulane defeated Temple 20-14 in that first Sugar Bowl. It marked a golden era of Tulane football.
The quarterback on Tulane's Rose Bowl team, Lowell Red Dawson, replaced Cox as coach in 1936. Tulane's football fortunes continued behind the efforts of players like All-Americans Ralph Wenzel and Harley McCullum, All-SEC players Warren Bruner, Bobby Jitterbug Kellogg, Tommy O'Boyle, and Captain Paul Kruger. Fred Casabry remembered Coach Red Dawson.
Very strict, very hard, very tough. I was frightened to death. Everybody was, except Ralph Bond. There's a couple of players like Ralph Bond and Another one that called him by his first name. That was appalling to me, that anybody could get familiar with Red Dawson. I was scared to death of him.
The 1938 season was marred by a massive brawl in the Tulane-LSU game that spilled over into the cane field that surrounded LSU Stadium in those days. The battle stopped momentarily when the band played the national anthem, but resumed after the last note had been sounded.
I had been at Tulane long enough then to work up a good hate for LSU. I didn't hate LSU, I just hated the football team. As a matter of fact, I preached it so much that I couldn't get any of my kids to go to LSU, and I wanted them to do it. We were dedicated to beating LSU at all costs. And we did. We beat them like a drum in 1938.
A reunion of the 1940 Sugar Bowl team brought back memories of the great players from that great era.
Members of the 1938-39 Green Wave football teams gathered for homecoming to reminisce about two of the greatest football teams in Tulane's history. Both squads finished with identical 8-1-1 records, but the 39 team had the chance for the greatest honors. Texas A&M was named the national champions after the regular season, which was the custom then. The Aggies were chosen to defend that title in the Sugar Bowl against the Green Wave.
I think it was a team with the best concept of a team concept that I've ever seen. There were no individual stars, but together we made a crackerjack good football team.
There was a wave of excitement early in the game as Tulane's defense played tough. But late in the first quarter, A&M's big John Kimbrough plunged in from the 1-yard line to give the Aggies a 7-0 lead.
Very few people ran on us until we got into the Sugar Bowl, and big John Kimbrough ran on us. But before that, 1 first down, 5 first downs were just about the limit on the ground that anybody had against our great team.
Tulane bounced back in the third quarter when Bobby Kellogg took this quick kick and behind some good blocks and with a few nifty moves of his own, raced 75 yards for the tying score. Tulane 7, A&M 7. In the fourth period, Tulane recovered an Aggie fumble. Fred Casabry helped work the ball to the 2, and Manette Butler scored from there, making it Tulane 13, Texas A&M 7. Watch the top of your screen as the Aggies' Herbie Smith raced in, untouched, to block the all-important extra point try, a play that turned out to be critical.
And we both started for the ball, and I said, Jimmy, pick it up. And, we were going to try to go on and score the extra point. And he tried to scoop it, one hand instead of picking it up with both hands, and he missed it. And so he turned around and came back and picked it up again, but we only got back to the 3-yard line.
Late in the game, A&M drove 69 yards to cut short Tulane's hope for an upset. Wellman Price hit Herbie Smith, who then lateraled to Kimbrough. The big man broke loose to go in for the tying score. The Aggies kicked their point after to take a 14-13 victory over Tulane and defend their title as the best college football team in the nation.
I think we would have won going away, providing if we had played anybody under the sun out in California. The fact that we had a feeler from the Rose Bowl was our undoing. All the boys wanted a train trip to California, and we never were ready to play our best. That's the truth.
Tulane was led by some big-name players during the World War II years. Consensus All-American Ernie Blandon, Bobby Glass, Lou Thomas, all led the way as Claude Little Monk Simons took over the reins as head coach. Other Tulane greats from that era included Marty Comer, whose 6 TD catches in one game is still a Tulane Centennial record. And all SEC players like end Ray Olson, guard Gaston Bourgeois, center Lester Gatewood, and back Joe Renfro all helped ensure Tulane's success. Gaston Bourgeois started as a 16-year-old freshman and earned all SEC honors 4 consecutive years. Dub Jones led Tulane to one of its best seasons during the war years in 1944 when he led all wave rushers with 700 yards. At the end of World War II, Henry Franco, who had led Tulsa to 4 bowl bids, including 2 Sugar Bowls, replaced Monk Simons as coach. Eddie Price led a host of wartime veterans like Benny Ellender, O.J. Key, Ken Tarzetti, Vic Klein, and Don Forche back to campus to rebuild the Tulane football program. By 1947, Tulane was getting back on track behind the passing of Benny Ellender, the receiving of Ray Pratts, and the power running of Eddie Price. Stanley Cotterman, a center from that era, remembers the great players who helped bring Tulane back to prominence.
Eddie Price was one of the finest runners I've ever seen. He was great off the blocks as far as starting, and of course he held the Southeastern Conference record for over 30 years for rushing, over 3,300 yards, I think, over 6 yards per carry. So that tells you how good he was. He was very emotional about everything he did. In fact, he had a nickname in high school called Superman because he was one of the few guys that fooled with weights before they got there. And he was always, every play that he'd run in scrimmage or practice, everybody would run 15, 20 yards, he'd run 50 yards.
That power displayed itself in 1948 with a 9-1 record and 1,178 yards rushing by Price. The 30 trap, the play that Price made famous, saw Eddie shoot the gap over the center guard slot. Handing the ball off to Price was little sophomore quarterback Joe Ernst. At only 5'8", 160, Ernst played much bigger than his size and weight, throwing for 809 yards, many of those passes to Dick Sheffield, who averaged 18 yards a catch, a record that lasted for 22 years. All-SEC tackle Paul Lee and Cotterman at center anchored an offensive line that gave Ernst and Price all the protection and blocking they would need. Defensively, linebacker Bill Swoboda and defensive back Bobby Jones led a unit that shut out 4 opponents and did not allow any opponent to score more than twice. The season ended with a 46-0 whitewashing of LSU in Baton Rouge. Eddie Price ran wild in that game, scoring and scoring over and over again. When it was over, Tulane would beat LSU, but it would be the last time that would happen for the next 25 years. The 48 team was richly deserving of a bowl bid, but did not get one, staying home while lesser teams played in the bowls. The next year, 1949, Eddie Price continued to run wild, rushing for 1,137 yards, leading Tulane to a 7-2-1 record. Price ended his fabulous career as the NCAA's all-time leading rusher with 3,095 career yards. That's still a Tulane Centennial record that has not been approached. Against Navy in the finest game of Eddie's career, Price rushed for 238 yards. However, an upset loss to LSU at the end of the season probably cost Tulane a bowl bid. In the early 50s, with the school facing a deficit, football was put on an austerity program that limited the number of scholarships that could be given. Franco was replaced by Raymond Bear Wolf as coach. During the era, individual players continued to shine. A tall, lanky Texan named Max MeGee would lead Tulane as a rusher and then go on to earn fame in the National Football League with the Green Bay Packers. In 1954, Andy Pilney, a longtime Tulane assistant and former Notre Dame All-American, began an 8-year reign as head coach. Over that span, Pilney would battle the financial and scholarship cutbacks in the same fierce competitive manner that his Green Wave teams would battle the opposition. Despite those handicaps, Pilney still had an immediate impact on Tulane's program by somehow getting the most from the players and scholarships that were available.
So it was a problem with us. I don't think it was the emphasis on the standpoint of the president. I think it was just the general toughness of the requirements to getting boys in school. And I think that was the biggest problem.
In 1955, co-captain Tony Sardisco helped lead Tulane to its first winning season since 1950. That included a victory over VMI 20-7 in Tulane's first night game. Players like Willie Hoff, Ronnie Quillian, Don Miller, Dalton Truax, and Gene Newton helped lead the Wave to back-to-back winning seasons with a 6-4 record in 1956.
It was great as far as I was concerned. And the reason why I say that is because in those days, we were playing, of course, at that time, both ways. We were playing both offense and defense. I enjoyed that very much. And one of the reasons I enjoyed it was because you got to call your own plays. I would guess that we called 99% of our plays. We called most of our plays at that time from the line of scrimmage, as a matter of fact.
This '56 game against Ole Miss in Jackson produced one of Gene Newton's greatest Green Wave moments. On the second play of the second half, in the mud at Jackson, Mississippi, Newton took off on this 86-yard scoring run to upset the Ole Miss Rebels.
We had a great ball club. We really had some good ball players at that time. We just didn't have enough of them. And although it was considered to be a big upset, we didn't feel like it was that big of an upset. We felt like we could play with anybody on any given day. And if we didn't have any injuries, we could play with anybody at that time.
By 1958, Claude Boo Mason joined Richie Pettibone in the lineup to excite Greeny fans with some big plays. Pettibone, number 17 at quarterback and in the defensive backfield, led the charge as Tulane beat Alabama. Pettibone went on to an all-NFL career with the Chicago Bears and was later named head coach of the Washington Redskins. In '59, two young promising running backs provided more than enough highlights for Tulane fans, Tommy Mason and Terry Terrebonne. Mason was plagued by injuries that season, but there was nothing wrong with Terrebonne, who provided some big moments. In this game against Detroit, Terrebonne breaks into the open, only to have an official get in his way and make the tackle. It often took an extra man to bring down this sophomore running back. Terrebonne would go on to a distinguished Marine Corps career. But his love for his alma mater would see him later return as an athletic administrator in charge of the Green Wave Club. Terry Terrebonne was proud of the heart, desire, and determination displayed by Green Wave athletes who played during the tough decade of the 50s.
I think that basically we were a team that came out there that year and for every game. We had always played a great first half, and I think our bench strength showed during the second half. Great bunch of guys, all went on to do well in the business world, and by all of them coming back for homecoming, have a great deal of love for Tulane University.
Neil Jones was a center on those late 50 teams. The fiery determination and the never-say-die attitude learned in those lean years at Tulane helped Jones survive through years as a prisoner of war.
I was a guest of the president of Tulane for the 1973 Tulane-LSU game here in Tulane Stadium. We beat them the first time in 25 years, 14-0. And the happiest guy in New Orleans that night was Neil Jones. She said they were waiting for me to come home, and by God they did, and so it was worth it.
A fully recovered Tommy Mason had one of the great seasons in Tulane football history in 1960. Old number 20 led the SEC in rushing and scored 13 touchdowns. Mason set a single-season record for yardage gained rushing, receiving, and on returns, 1,475, a record that endured for 28 years. The longevity of this record is made special by the fact that Mason accumulated his yardage during an era when players were required to play both ways, which Tommy Mason did very well on defense. In the 1960 National Football League draft, the Minnesota Vikings made Tulane's Tommy Mason the very first player to be selected. Tommy's Tulane years will always be remembered.
I think the sense of belonging, the sense of that you had a support group somewhere in your background that made you feel worth as a human being, and I think that all goes to help you, give you the self-confidence that you need to succeed whatever you do.
Assistant coach and former Tulane All-American Tommy O'Boyle, who played for the Wave during the glory years of 38-40, replaced Pilney as head coach in 1961. But O'Boyle found little success battling the same restrictions that Pilney faced. By 1966, Tulane was already looking for its third coach of the decade. Enter Jim Pittman in '66, a newsworthy year for the Green Wave. Tulane withdrew from the Southeastern Conference that year and went intersectional with its schedule, and Jim Pittman turned in the only winning season of the decade. Backfield coach Joe Berthelot turned Tulane's wing T offense into a showcase for the athletic ability of junior quarterback Bobby Duhon, who amassed 748 yards rushing, which was the most ever by a Green Wave signal caller. Tulane had failed to score in its 3 previous season openers, but in '66, it was the Green Wave defense pitching a shutout while Duhon led the offense to the end zone in a 13-0 win over Virginia Tech. With a strong defense anchored by big linemen like Vic Umont, Tulane registered wins over Texas A&M, Virginia, Cincinnati, and Vanderbilt with the help of a fourth-quarter goal line stand. The 5-4-1 record was a tribute to Pittman's first year. But reality was 3-7 in '67, despite the fact that Bobby Duhon would gain better than 1,000 yards in 3 straight seasons. Duhon would go on to a fine NFL career with the New York Giants. Backup quarterback Warren Bankston followed Duhon as Tulane's signal caller for the next 2 years. Bankston's ability and leadership allowed him to enjoy a brilliant NFL career with the Oakland Raiders. Over the next few years, Pittman was shaping a fine nucleus of young players that included Rick Kingray, Ray Hester, and Joe Bullard of Bullard Bandits fame. Offensively, receiver Steve Barrios, who would become the first Tulane receiver to gain 1,000 yards in a season despite missing 4 games with injury, was the main target of quarterback Rusty Lachase, who became Tulane's first 1,000-yard passer. This unit would lead Tulane to its first bowl bid in over 30 years, a win in the Liberty Bowl, making 1970 the year of the green.
This is the 1970 Liberty Bowl trophy where Tulane defeated Colorado 17-3. However, this trophy symbolizes more than just a Tulane Bowl win. It marked the first time in 30 years that Tulane had been to a bowl, an era described by Marty Muley in his book Rolling Green as spanning storm clouds in Europe to the hippie peace movement of the United States. It also marked the return of Tulane football from the de-emphasis years of the 50s and 60s.
Tulane opponent Colorado was a massively talented team that had demolished Alabama in the Liberty Bowl the year before. Tulane was given little chance against the Buffaloes, who were averaging 400 yards of total offense per game. But the Green Wave defense limited the Buffaloes to 175 yards. David Abercrombie ran wild on that bright, chilly Memphis afternoon, and when it was over, Colorado was stunned by the 17-3 defeat handed to them by an inspired Tulane team. The week after the Liberty Bowl, Jim Pittman resigned to accept the job at TCU. Former Tulane quarterback Benny Ellender was appointed Tulane's head coach. 1972 will be remembered as the famous 5th down year. Tulane lost to Miami, Florida on an extra down. With Tulane leading 21-17 and 2:35 remaining in the Orange Bowl, it was 1st and 10 Miami at the Tulane 18-yard line. The Hurricanes went over left tackle for 2. On 2nd and 8 at the 16, Miami quarterback Ed Carney threw an incomplete pass. On 3rd and 8 at the 16, Carney completes this pass for 11, but the play is called back for illegal procedure on Miami. Replaying 3rd down and 13 at the 21-yard line, the Miami quarterback is sacked for an 11-yard loss. That made it 4th and 24 at the 32, or it should have been. The officials made a mistake with the downs marker, which now showed 3rd down. The real 4th down pass was incomplete. Tulane should have taken over on downs, but Miami was given a 5th down. The downs marker incorrectly showing 4th. And Carney threw a touchdown pass for Miami's victory, 24-21. The 6-5, rather than 7-4 record that resulted, many feel was enough to cost the Green Wave a bowl bid. In 1940, Cornell apparently beat Dartmouth 6-3 with an inadvertent 5th down on the last play of an Ivy League game. After realizing the error, Cornell officials nullified the touchdown and conceded the game to Dartmouth 3-0. With this precedent, Tulane requested Miami to do the same. But this wasn't the Ivy League, and the Hurricanes were hungry for a victory. Since a little over 1 minute remained on the clock, Miami officials felt Tulane had their chance to rally back for a victory and refused to concede the game. 1973 was Ellender's best year at Tulane. All-American defensive tackle Charlie Hall led the way to a 9-2 regular season and an invite to the Astro Bluebonnet Bowl in Houston.
Basically, the 73 team was a team that basically gelled together with the talent that we had. The guys all came together and came to become a great year for us. And, you know, there was games in there where things was tough, but we was able to turn the corner. So I think basically it was a team that was gelling together with the talent that we had, and it came together and became to be a good year that year for us.
Steve Foley's running and passing made the difference that year. Heroics included a game-winning TD pass over Duke with 9 seconds remaining, and scampering for a Tulane quarterback record 181 yards against Vanderbilt that assured Tulane of a Liberty Bowl bid. Foley's and Tulane's success was assured by a big offensive line composed of Ed Mickelson, Malin Harrell, Mike Owens, Mike Arthur, and Steve Wade. Tackle Ed Mickelson.
We were pretty big. I think we averaged about 265, 70 pounds. We were about, I think, 6'5" at the tackles. Mike Arthur was about 6'3", 6'2". We had, I think, the shortest fellow was Mike Owens, and he screwed up our average a little bit. But then Steve Wade was in there, and he was about 245 and about 6'3", 6'4" again. So we had a pretty good offensive line, pretty big offensive line.
Charlie Hall anchored the defensive line. Mark Oliveri wreaked havoc in the middle, and Rusty Chambers led the team with 153 tackles. The three spearheaded a defense that was stingy and tough, holding 5 opponents to 6 points or less, including 3 shutouts. One of those shutouts was Tulane's biggest win ever, a 14-0 victory over Orange Bowl-bound LSU, ending a quarter-of-a-century drought. With Steve Foley injured and out of action, backup quarterback Terry Looney was thrust into the starting quarterback role. It would be Looney who would evolve the hero by throwing the winning touchdown pass against LSU.
It was right before the half, and it was kind of a situation where, you know, Billy Laird looks around and says, okay, Looney, you're in. And, you know, I go on, I'm on the field, and it's less than 2 minutes. And I remember we had a play call that was, I was sprinting into a slot formation, and Mike Foley was supposed to go down the sideline and clear it out, and Tom Fortner was going to trail him. I'm supposed to hit Fortner, trailing Foley. And I sprint out, and as soon as I come off the line with the ball, they jammed Mike at the line of scrimmage, which that meant, Tom was dead in the water too. And the protection was really good, and Darwin wasn't even a factor in the play, to start with. And I'm sitting there with all this time, and all of a sudden I just see this hand come up through the middle, and he's sitting there wide open, and he was so open that it's one of those, do you drill him the ball or do you loft the ball? And I almost got caught in an indecision on what to do with it and put too much air under it, and the safety almost was able to make a play on the ball because he was that wide open to start with. You didn't want to miss him. It's one of those easy ones to miss. I saw him score. That was one of the greatest sights I think I'd ever seen because, LSU had lined their band up at the end of the end zone. They're ready to come out. Well, Darwin scores, and then, he's standing there, and Tom Fortner flies up to him. I think 4 band members are still looking for their teeth. But, it was just a great sight. It's one you'll never forget.
The victory over LSU was such a high that the Astro Bluebonnet Bowl was anticlimactic for Tulane. The final score of that bowl game proved the same. Houston Cougars 47, Tulane Green Waves 7 in the Astrodome. A year later, on a cold, damp December 2nd afternoon in 1974, the Green Wave played its last home game ever in Tulane Stadium, dropping a 26-10 decision to Ole Miss. In '75, the Louisiana Superdome became the home of the Tulane Green Wave football program, and the Waves celebrated by defeating Ole Miss 14-3. After a 4-7 record, Benny Ellender, the winningest coach at Tulane in 25 years, was fired with 8 years remaining on his contract. A young pre-med student quarterback, Rock Hodges, and Canadian kicker Ed Murray, who would enjoy an NFL career starting with the Detroit Lions, joined players like tackle Eric Laxo, who would later play with the NFL's Miami Dolphins, and running back Marvin Christian, to form the ingredients for a team that would bring success to new coach Larry Smith by 1979.
He was, I feel, the exact kind of coach we needed at that time. Namely, he was a young, energetic coach, spoke to us. He was, I'm not sure, 38, 39 years old when he got the job, and I think he related to us very easily. He was an excellent recruiter, and he knew the game quite well. He had a lot of energy, and as you know, coaching is not just X's and O's. It's doing the little things outside of the practice field and outside of the stadium on Saturday evenings that go towards producing a winning team.
On the way to the 1979 Liberty Bowl, Rock Hodges turned in one of the outstanding individual performances in Tulane history, completing 215 of 367 pass attempts for 2,345 yards and 21 touchdowns, all new Tulane season records. His favorite targets were wide receiver Alton Alexis and tight end Rodney Holman, who would later enjoy an NFL career with the Cincinnati Bengals. It was the ingredients of a fun and powerful offense.
It was a fun offense to be a quarterback in. It required me as a quarterback to do a lot of thinking, do a lot of preparation, an enormous amount more preparation before the games my senior year than in the previous 3 years.
Go ahead and take another one. We'll save the third one for the field goal, okay? Let's go just right over. A-fly, 165.
Defensively, linebackers Frank Robinson and Marty Wetzel, who would later play NFL football with the New York Jets, and middle guard Wilfred Simon would lead a tough defense, each with at least 100 tackles. The regular season icing on the cake was the victory over LSU.
Yes, we were very confident. We were very confident. Why? Because we were playing so well. We were on a run. We played Ole Miss the week before, very good Ole Miss team. John Forcade was the quarterback, and really beat them soundly. And it was just, we were just playing very well.
This team earned their Liberty Bowl berth. The 1979 Liberty Bowl became a battle of field goals, with four-time All-South Independent kicker Ed Murray getting one less opportunity to kick than his Penn State opponent. The Nittany Lions defeated Tulane 9-6, but Rock Hodges had made his mark, being named the Liberty Bowl's most valuable player. Vince Gibson replaced Larry Smith, who left for Arizona in 1980. Gibson led the Wave to a 7-4 record and an invite to the Hall of Fame Bowl in Birmingham, marking the first time the Green Wave participated in postseason play in consecutive seasons. Senior quarterback Nicky Hall, emerging from the shadow of Rock Hodges, took full advantage of his chance to shine, tying Hodges' single-season TD mark of 21. Hall set new Tulane offensive records, which included an 84-yard touchdown pass to Marcus Anderson against SMU, the longest completion in the first 100 years of Tulane football. Lionel Washington, who went on to a career with the Oakland Raiders in the NFL, anchored the defense, and Vince Manala kicked Tulane to big wins over Ole Miss and Kentucky with no time remaining on the clock. Tulaneans felt the win over Kentucky was justice being served. Kentucky coach Fran Kersey was the coach of the Miami Hurricane fifth down victory over Tulane. In this game, with Kentucky leading late in the game, 2 defensive pass interference penalties did the Wildcats in. This last one on the last play of the game, allowing Manala to kick the game-winning field goal for Tulane with no time remaining on the clock. Then on a chilly December evening in Birmingham, Arkansas defeated the Green Wave in the Hall of Fame Bowl 34-15. The next 2 seasons would be remembered as the years Vince Gibson won the big one. Gibson would beat LSU in both 1981 and 82. In 81, quarterback Mike MeGee came off the bench to lead the Wave to 6 victories in its last 7 games, including a 48-7 romp over LSU in the Superdome. MeGee throwing, Nolan France and Rodney Holman's receiving, and the defense led by Ricky Goff and Sly McGrew allowed Tulane to register its largest margin of victory over the Tigers since the 46-0 rout in 1948. Then in 1982, Tulane pulled off one of the greatest upsets in Tulane history. A 24-point underdog, the Green Wave handed Orange Bowl-bound LSU a stunning 31-28 defeat in Tiger Stadium. Running back Reggie Reginelli remembers.
I can't think of a better way to end my career at Tulane. That's the last time I ever touched a football for Tulane, was that winning touchdown in Tiger Stadium.
It was Reginelli who scored the winning touchdown late in the game. It was a play that will be etched in the minds of Tulane faithful forever.
It was a 4th down play, 4th and 3. Mike MeGee, who had a great game, called a halfback option, and we read the play perfectly. LSU blitzed. Mike dropped the ball off to me, and really, the rest was fairly easy. I just ran it down the sidelines, and into a night that everybody remembers.
That year, Tulane place kicker Tony Wood enjoyed a fine season kicking as he numbered 52 and 53-yard field goals among his 11 successful kicks. Wood did not miss an extra point as he kicked his way into the National Football League. Wally English's tenure as head coach will be remembered as controversial. English inherited future NFL performers like Bubby Brister, Don Maggs, Ron Tilton, and Burnell Dent. With such players, Wally's Wave defeated powerful Florida State 34-28 in the Superdome in one of Tulane's finest wins. However, Tulane would have to forfeit the victory due to an ineligible player. Wally's son, John English, filed suit against the NCAA, alleging he was unjustly being deprived of a final season of eligibility. A temporary restraining order allowed John to play, but the NCAA had the final say, ruling John English ineligible and forcing Tulane to forfeit wins in which John English had taken part. Coach Wally English departed after just 5 wins in 2 years and a bench-clearing brawl at LSU. Mack Brown, barely 34 years old when the 1985 season kicked off, would rebuild Tulane's program with players like Terrence Jones, who played at running back and quarterback his freshman year, and Mark Zeno, who would go on to become the NCAA's all-time leading receiving yardage leader. They were joined by players like Richard Harvey at linebacker, defensive backs Tookie Spand and Eric Thomas, a future NFL Cincinnati Bengal, and Rodney Hunter, who would lead the team in rushing in 1986. In 1987, Tulane finished 6-5. Mack Brown would leave for North Carolina, but not before his final team was rewarded with an Independence Bowl bid.
Dr. Kelly, on behalf of the Independence Bowl and the communities of Shreveport and Bossier City, we would like to extend an invitation to Tulane University for a very, very well-deserved invitation. I've never seen a team play with so much heart as I did tonight. And we'd love to have you come on December 19th and play in our bowl game.
Thank you very much.
The Washington Huskies defeated Tulane in the Independence Bowl 24-12, bringing the official close to the Mack Brown era. It also brought to a close the career of one of the best receivers ever to wear a Tulane uniform. Mark Zeno broke the NCAA's career receiving yardage record with 3,725 yards. His record-breaking catch coming in the Superdome against Southwestern Louisiana.
I think it's great. I finally realized, that the record was a great accomplishment, and coaching them brought it to my attention, that it was a big accomplishment for a college player, and that all the college players that passed through college, didn't accomplish that, and I was one that could. So I think it's very special.
Mark Zeno was Tulane's go-to man from 1984 to 1987. This 6'3", 200-pound wide receiver broke every Tulane receiving record in the history of the school. On his way to first-team AP All-America honors, Mark Zeno became the NCAA's all-time receiving yardage leader, gaining 3,725 yards. Mark Zeno proved to be an acrobat, ballet dancer, sprinter, and just an all-around clutch receiver for the Wave. Alumnus and former player Jim Wilson, a center for Tulane football during the 1950s, spearheaded a drive with fellow alumni and benefactors Ben Weiner and Kent McWilliams that would provide Tulane with one of the finest athletic complexes in the nation. Ground was broken for the James Wilson Center for Intercollegiate Athletics. The total complex was dedicated a few years later, assuring the university of having one of the finest athletic plants to begin the second century of Green Wave athletics. Players like Mitchell Price and Eric Thomas, both of whom would go on to NFL careers, were just a few of the stars performing for Tulane as the first 100 years of Tulane football began to come to a close. Coach Greg Davis, who followed Brown, replaced Zeno with Jerome McIntosh, and Michael Pierce emerged as an offensive threat, smashing Tommy Mason's 28-year-old record for all-purpose yardage with 1,644 yards. The season brought to a close the fabulous career of Terrence Jones. Terrence Jones accounted for 2,759 total offensive yards in his senior year, 1988. 2,305 of those were by air. It's no wonder Terrence completed 162 passes on the year, 15 of those for touchdowns. Terrence had saved the best for last, that is, the final home game in the Louisiana Superdome. Denver Bronco quarterback John Elway, who enjoyed a stellar career at Stanford University, was on hand to see if Terrence Jones would surpass him on the total offensive list. And Jones did. On this play, Terrence drops back into the pocket and hits Jerome McIntosh on a pass that covers 54 yards, moving Terrence ahead of John Elway on the NCAA's career total offensive list. Jones finished with 9,437 passing yards, and that was good enough to place 6th on the all-time NCAA passing offense list. The biggest win of the Greg Davis era came in 1990 on the road at Syracuse. When receiver Steve Ballard gathered in this pass late in the game, the nationally ranked Orangemen and a packed Carrier Dome crowd was stunned into silence. Running back Chance Miller had a big year running the football, gaining 805 yards rushing. Names like Jay Rink and Pat Stant were standouts on the defense during this era. Will Urson continued the tradition of great Tulane receivers in 1991, but Tulane's fortunes floundered, making way for a new coach, Buddy Tevens, to introduce a new system of football for the start of Tulane's second century of gridiron action.
In sports today, Tulane's Buddy Tevens outlines secret strategy.
Breaking out the system, ain't gonna play no chump. Only one goal in mind, gonna stomp something wrong. Buddy, 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 Buddy's the man. Winning is the name of the game, and it's easy to understand. The Buddy system, can't beat the system. The Buddy system. All you just believers, you're in for a big surprise. Gonna see some Gregory, Tevens style. Buddy, 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 Buddy's the man. Winning is the name of the game, and it's easy to understand. The Buddy system, can't beat the system. The Buddy system.
It's gonna change the way we play football at Tulane.
The Buddy system began on a bright note with a season-opening win at SMU, 13-12. The first road opening win since 1975 for Tulane. A few weeks later, the Green Wave beat Nevada in Tevens' home opener 34-17. Tevens' first team played with daring, heart, fervor, and momentum that spread excitement through the Tulane community. Gadget plays like Fumble Rooski displayed an intuitiveness and challenging atmosphere that has stimulated Tulane fans into new hope and a belief for the future. Tulane fans take pride that their university's athletic accomplishments have not come at the expense of the student athlete. At Tulane, success in the classroom and on the field exist hand in hand. It's a commitment to the student athlete, to the young men who play the game.
You can't hardly miss the fact that academics has always been primary, that we're all the student athlete here. And it has played such a large role in the development of every athlete at the university in his afterlife, as far as athletics was concerned, that I don't think we could really reach out and say, this is what they did or this is what they didn't do. It has always been a part of the university. Academics has always been drilled into the athlete that was here, and every one of us have profited from the academic standpoint, irregardless of if we did additionally benefit from the athletic standpoint.
100 years of Tulane football, a centennial celebration. Tulane has seen the good and bad, the ups and downs, the thrill of victory and the agony of defeat. As Tulane enters its second century of collegiate football, athletic director in this centennial year, Dr. Kevin White, has this message for the Tulane family.
Tulane University is one of the top academic institutions in America. Tulane also enjoys a great and rich tradition in college football. The first 100 years have provided a wonderful foundation for the future. This is a program that is moving to the next level. Folks, we need your support.